Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome, everybody, to Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and it's great to be with you today as we explore this thing called apologetics, where we explain, defend the faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. And I am Gary Michuta, your host and sensei, and got a great show in store for you today. You know, it's kind of funny. Sometimes people will deny that God exists, and then they look around and notice that the world still seems to be running. And so it seems as if you could deny God's existence without any repercussions, any consequences, really not a change in anything. But if you've been following our series with Ken Hensley, you find out that, no, that's not true. You might not hear it, you might not see it, but in a very real way, you know, reality kind of collapses once you deny God's existence. And that's who we're going to have on the show. Coming up on the other side of the first break, we're going to have Master Apologist Ken Hensley come on to the show, and we're going to finish up this wonderful series we've been doing. It's really called, it's based on presuppositional apologetics. And basically it's, if God doesn't exist, then how does, what's the ramifications of that, and how does that square with our basic understanding of reality? You know, what we, just common sense experience of life. And Ken's always fun to have on the show. Can't wait to have him on. And we'll dig into that, and we'll put a nice bow on this whole series. So hopefully you've been following it. If you haven't been following it, folks, I highly recommend that you jump onto either your phone app, Virgin Most Powerful phone app, or go on to virginmostpowerfulradio.org, the website, click on our programs, go to Hands-On Apologetics, and listen to some of the previous programs with Ken. Or, you could also go on YouTube to our channel, Hands-On Apologetics channel. I'm not sure if it's up there, but it very well could be. And, check it out because, like I said, Ken has been doing a great job, just pulling thread by thread exactly what are the ramifications for denying God's existence. Also, we do our critical thinking skills. Today's Finding the Fallacy, folks, is the appeal to novelty. And also we meet an early church father. Yesterday we had St. Jerome, big church father. Today we have just as big of one, St. John Chrysostom. In fact, we might have to make it into a two-parter because there's a lot of biographical information we need to cover in order to get to know this awesome early father. And, without further ado, let me give my shout-outs to all those watching social media, live stream, Facebook, YouTube. Thank you so much for the emoji explosions, folks. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I also want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and around the world, perhaps via podcast. Like I said, you can get that at our phone app. If you don't have the phone app, please download it. It's free, and it's got lots of great stuff. Or you could go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org and check out the programs there. Not only my program, by the way, but all the other awesome programs that Virgin Most Powerful Radio puts on. For those in social media land, I appreciate it if you could spread the word. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Subscribe to our channel. Promote, thumbs up, ring the bell, toot the whistles, whatever you guys do. And we really appreciate it because, we got such great stuff like Ken Hensley. It's a shame not to be able to share and let other people know, especially those people that need to know. It'd be a shame if they, just never heard of the program, so they can't tap into this info. So, okay, let's jump to the Finding the Fallacy. The appeal to novelty. Yes, this is a fallacy, and the fallacy is actually. Once I read the description, you're going to say, "Oh yeah, I've run into this a lot." It's a fallacy where one prematurely claims that an idea or proposal is correct or superior simply because it's new or modern. And, man, this is a very common fallacy today. I think we're almost programmed for this kind of thinking. It's always the latest iPhone. It's always better than the older iPhone. It's always the latest version of an operating system, is better than the older versions, although I don't think that's really true. But, we're constantly used to updates and new versions and new models that we automatically are programmed to think that the latest and greatest must be the best, and that can also transfer into thinking it's maybe true because it's modern or new, and that's the fallacy of the appeal to novelty, to just assume that something's new and new, it must be true. And in some ways, there is some truth to that, because, like I said, software and other things. But if you think about it, when it comes to following Christ, it's really the old that's the best. It's the stuff that has been passed on since the time of Jesus and his apostles. That's really the gold standard. That's really where we're dealing with superior information. Of course, later development stuff is great, but it's kind of the opposite. It's actually the older is better. So that's our finding the fallacy for today, the appeal to novelty. Let's jump into our Meet the Early Church Father for today, who is St. John Chrysostom, who lived between somewhere around 344, 354, died around AD 407. There's a lot of information. This wonderful doctor of the church, John Chrysostom, I think we might have to make it into a twofer, to a two-parter, and split this. So hopefully I can I could get a good chunk of the material in, and hopefully end on a cliffhanger, so you'll have to tune in tomorrow to find out what happens to John Chrysostom. So let's begin. Okay, some say John Chrysostom is unparalleled. Many times he's compared to Augustine, but quite frankly, he's unique. There's only one John Chrysostom out there, and he really can't be compared with other church fathers. That's kind of the realm he lives in. Although Chrysostom has probably more early biographers than any other church father in history, there's a lot of things we don't know about him. For example, Jurgens points out we're not exactly sure what year he was born. The best we could narrow it down to is 344 or 354. So despite all this bibliographic information, there's still some blank spots. He was a native of Antioch. His earliest education came from his mother, who was widowed at the age of 20. He studied philosophy, and also he studied rhetoric under the celebrated Labienus, a pagan rhetorician, in whose school he met and formed a lifelong friendship with Theodore of Mopsuestia. The Catholic historian Zosimon has a legend that very well could be true about him. It says that when Labienus was on his deathbed, his students asked him who should be his successor, and he replied, John, if only Christians had not stolen him. And so there might be a grain of truth there. When John was 18 years old, he met Meletius, the bishop of Antioch, who apparently saw something in the boy as far as promise for a grand future. He baptized John, and John became Meletius's constant companion. And 3 years after his baptism, during which time he was studying theology under Diodorus of Tarsus, John was ordained a lector. Now, in spite of his mother begging him to remain at home with her, because, except for John, she was completely alone in the world, John nevertheless sought out solitude and the ascetic life outside of Antioch. He spent 4 years living as a hermit, after which he founded his own cave, where he remained for 2 years. And it's during this latter period where he never laid down to sleep, day or night. And as a consequence, he developed some severe health problems, some gastrointestinal difficulties, as well as malfunctioning kidneys from the cold and dampness. So he was unable to continue his life as a hermit. and he was forced to return back to society in order to care for his ailments. And this is providential. You know, you might think that you're leading a good and holy life. God's pointing you in a certain direction. And maybe God has better things for you. And, you know, I'm sure he probably was dejected that he couldn't continue as an ascetic. But, you know, his loss is our gain. In 381 AD, he was ordained a deacon by Meletius. And in 386 AD, a priest by Flavian. He was ordained a priest by Flavian, the successor to Meletius. Under Flavian, John was assigned for 12 years, that's between 386 and 397, as a preacher in the main church of Antioch. And it was to this preaching, of course, that he won his famous title of Chrysostom. And here's some trivia for you, folks. Chrysostom means golden mouth. So his beautiful preaching earned him the title the Golden Mouth. In 397 AD, Nectarius died, and he had been succeeded by Gregory of Nazianzus, the Bishop of Constantinople. And the emperor brought John to the capital, where on February 26, 398 AD, John was somewhat unwilling, was the unwilling recipient of episcopal consecration at the hands of at least equally unwilling Theophilus of Alexandria. So he's ordained a bishop pretty much against his wishes, and the person who ordained him pretty much against his wishes as well, Theophilus of Alexandria. This is the beginning of some major problems for John Chrysostom. And we'll just park it right there. When we come back, you know, tomorrow with the Meet the Early Church Father, we'll find out exactly what went on with Theophilus of Alexandria and what kind of trouble John got into. Coming up next, Ken Hensley. And we're going to continue our series on Does Not Believing in God Have Consequences? Find out.
This is Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio. This March, VMPR, in association with the Catholic Resource Center, will be hosting a special conference for the Adoramus Society. Adoramus at the Triduum, a conference on the spirituality of the Triduum liturgies, featuring speakers Father Joseph Fessio, Dr. Anthony Lillis, and Christopher Karstens, addressing such topics as developing a liturgical spirituality, the spirituality of Holy Thursday, the spirituality of Good Friday, and the spirituality of the Paschal Vigil and Easter season. It all takes place March 14, 2020, at the historic Sacred Heart Chapel at 381 West Center Street, Covina, California, 91723. You can register online at vmpr.org or call now at 877-526-2151 to reserve your seat today for Adoramus at the Triduum. In 1 Corinthians 13:13, St. Paul says, "So there abide faith, hope, and love, these three." According to St. Ignatius of Antioch, faith is the beginning and love is the end, and God is the two of them brought into unity. Then comes everything else that makes up a Christian. May God grant that we may attain all the virtues that make for authentic followers of His Son.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. And, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, it's people will deny God's existence and kind of look around them and see that, like, the world hasn't collapsed around them. Everything's pretty much the same. But, in fact, what they don't know is that the world did indeed collapse around them by denying God's existence. And we have Ken Hensley on the show, and we have this whole series of where Ken has done such a wonderful job delineating how that world collapsed. By the way, Ken is a nationally known Catholic teacher and author who, since converting to the Catholic Church in 1997, has written extensively in the field of apologetics. He's been on Catholic radio, television, frequent speaker at conferences around the country. He also is the online resource and pastoral care coordinator for the Coming Home Network. And you can see all of Ken's great stuff at www.kennethhensley.com. And Ken, welcome back to Hands on Apologetics.
Hello, Gary. It's good to be here with you. By the way, I can't see you today. I'm seeing someone else.
Well, that's good. It's going to be a more enjoyable program for you. Hopefully the person you're looking at's somebody enjoyable to look at, not like Adolf Hitler or something.
Well, it looks like Santa Claus, actually. And it's just a frozen image. Someone sitting in a chair that looks like Santa Claus. Is that your control room, or?
It very well could be, or maybe it's Daniel Dennett. I don't know. Yeah, Richard's saying it's probably him. So
it doesn't matter, Richard.
Yeah. So Happy New Year, and how are things going on the West Coast?
Oh, well, things are going well. I've actually been ill all week with like a sinus infection, and so I'm just giving you some warning that if my brain this seems to be really slippery today, or if I cough a lot, that's why. I was at the doctor yesterday, and I just started on antibiotics today, but I'm kind of miserable. And in fact, I'd forgotten I was on the radio show, and I got this morning. I looked at my calendar, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm on the radio with Gary." But anyway,
well,
it's
you'll
fine.
do great.
I told my wife, I said, maybe this will be better because I'll end up speaking more slowly. But no, things are going great out here. My family's doing well. My 8 grandchildren down the road are doing well. And here at the Coming Home Network, we're doing fantastically. I'm working, I still pinch myself. And I think I can't believe that I have the job that I have at this stage in my life, that I basically work all day long just helping Protestant pastors of every stripe who are on the journey, to one degree or another toward the Catholic Church, just working with them, talking to them, answering questions. Yeah. It's just an amazing thing that I get to do, I'm so happy about it.
I'm jealous. Yeah, that is amazing ministry. And I can imagine probably pinching myself every morning, if I had your job, that you get to work, in that kind of a setting.
Yeah, it is pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
So I get to lead retreats for the Coming Home Network a couple times a year usually, and different things like that. So no, it's very, very good.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. The retreats, are they open to anybody, or is it only someone through the network?
No, it doesn't have to be someone who's a member of the network. We try to focus the retreats on converts, or to people who are on the journey, rather than lifelong Catholics. That's the one thing. Although we've even allowed lifelong Catholics to come if we had openings. We try to keep the retreats fairly small, like 25, 30 people at the most. Mm-hmm. There are really tremendous experiences I found. Because it's rather than people sitting in chairs and listening to lectures for 4 days, we really get to discuss together the whole, the whole thing of conversion, of what led them to look at the Catholic faith and what struggles they've had and where they are in their, the whole thing. It's just really, really good. But that's basically it. Yeah,
that is so important. Because when you're on the journey, not that I'm a convert, from what I understand, people that I've accompanied on the journey, you really feel like isolated and alone. And
Yes.
I think it's great to be around other people who are also kind of struggling through this, coming to the faith.
This is exactly what we find every time, that the people show up at the retreat, and we sit in a big square facing each other, and all the sessions are discussion oriented, where I will introduce the session and talk a little bit, and then I'll raise the question that we're going to discuss for the session, and I'll illustrate it from my own life and my own conversion. So I'll talk and kind of break the ice, and then we find every time that the people are just so excited, because it's true. They have felt often like they were totally alone. Their family doesn't understand what they're doing, maybe opposes them in a very dramatic way. Husbands and wives opposing each other. Many of them don't have any friends that understand what they're going through. And when they get to this retreat, by the time the retreat's over, they feel like they've made a bunch of best friends, And so it's really good for the ministry too, because it helps us to really get to know the people and not just have a kind of a theoretical network, of emails or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, keep up the great work. That is so needed.
Thank you.
We need to, I don't know, we need to clone you guys or something and make it more widely, around the nation, because,
well, you know how it is with Catholic I'm saying apologetics, but apostolates. We're completely supported by the giving and the gifts of people, and so, if we had, if some billionaires would drop a bundle of money on us, we could expand and we could be everywhere and we could employ more people and we could do a lot more. But we do what we can.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, most of my life I've been either running a nonprofit or being part of a nonprofit. And, it's amazing how much more we could do just with a few extra dollars a month. I mean, we really are limited. Yeah. But we're not here to talk about nonprofits. Yeah. We're here to talk about presuppositional apologetics.
And this is our concluding session on this series, too. So it's one in which I kind of want to wrap up as much as possible where we've gone and where we're going, okay?
Okay.
The series is, basically how I go about evangelizing people who doubt or deny the existence of God, how I do it. And anyway, I want to start. I want to skip over some of what I had at the beginning because I don't think we have enough time to do everything. But anyway, my approach is to start with what the Word of God teaches us. And I'm thinking about Romans chapter 1. I'd like to read it. For what can be known about God is plain to them. This is St. Paul writing in his epistle to the Romans. What can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. Ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature, namely his eternal power and deity, have been clearly perceived in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. This is where I begin with the foundational truth for my foundational truth for evangelism and apologetics. It's this truth revealed by Paul, and that is that no one really can escape the knowledge of God. No one can escape having some knowledge of God. After all, every single person, every atheist that I meet or talk to, and that you ever will, is someone who has been created in the image and likeness of God. Actually created to mirror forth the nature and being of God. And that person also lives in a world that the Bible teaches us cries out the existence of God. Thinking of Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands, day to day poureth forth speech, night to night reveals knowledge. You know that passage. There's no place where you can go on earth where you can't hear the message being preached. And so basically, think about it. If you and I are designed to be mirrors of God's being, we cannot know ourselves without knowing something of our Creator, because we are reflections of our Creator. We really can't look into the mirror without knowing something or seeing something of God. And then because we live in a world created by God, designed by God, we can't know the world really without knowing something about the one who made it. And my point here is simply that the revelation of God from within us, in our conscience, in our minds, and without us in the world, the knowledge of God, the revelation of God is quite inescapable. It's etched into the heart of every being. Now, with this in mind, then, when I talk to someone who tells me that he or she doesn't believe in God, I know that I'm talking with someone who knows an awful lot about this world that would not, that they could not know if atheism really were true. Okay?
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. And then and if we can kind of summarize, we'll walk through them. These are basically the sessions that we've done together over several months now, or not several, probably 10 months, 11 months, I don't know.
It's been a while, yeah.
First illustration, our atheist friend knows that human beings possess a special worth and dignity above other creatures. He knows this. She knows this. It's something that is simply known intuitively. And yet, according to his materialist atheist worldview, human beings have no more objective value than a cockroach or a rat or a rock, actually. Because according to the materialist worldview, we are nothing more than biochemical machines that have just evolved up out of the soup by natural processes. We are accidents in an accidental universe. And so, objectively speaking, if atheism were true, we have no value, objectively speaking. And yet, the atheist knows that we do. And this, to me, is one of the illustrations. Why does he know that it's true? Why does she know that it's true? Because she's the image of God. She's the image and likeness of God. So when she gets married and when she has a child, and she looks at her little baby daughter, or son, she cherishes this being, and she knows that this being has infinite value. She just knows it. And yet, according to her atheism, this being has no value.
Right. Yeah. Just a, biological machine, like you said, highly evolved, very sophisticated, but really no different than any other biological machines on the planet.
Yeah, and just an accident too. But yeah, a biological machine. Very, one of my teachers used to say, "Yeah, we are apes with a suitcase, or apes that got ahead." Or another illustration that I liked that he used to use was he used to call us the forward edge of the sludge of evolution. In an atheist universe, we're just the
beautiful
forward
picture.
Edge. Huh?
Beautiful picture.
Yeah, the forward edge of the sludge, of evolution. Well, okay, and then something else he knows. The atheist knows that there is a moral law. She knows that right and wrong are real. The atheist has always known this, and the atheist lives his entire life on the assumption that right and wrong are real, that justice is something real, that fairness is something real. Right. And yet, again, according to his worldview, he has no basis for believing in an objective right and wrong or a moral law or anything like that. Because, again, if the universe...
Right there, I hear the music coming up.
Oh, okay.
We're talking with Kenneth Hensley. More to come on the other side of the break.
This is Matthew Arnold inviting you to listen to Happy Hour on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Every week I offer reflections on the Sunday readings of the extraordinary form of the Mass and take a traditional look at the many challenges facing Catholics today. Drawing on Scripture and medieval sources like the Imitation of Christ, I'll help you on your personal quest for spiritual perfection so that you can find true happiness in holiness. Check out Happy Hour live every Friday from noon to 1 p.m. Pacific Time on our Virgin Most Powerful Radio YouTube channel or our VMPR smartphone app. It's easy to download the app to your phone from the App Store or when you visit our website, vmpr.org. That's Happy Hour live every Friday at noon or anytime on demand. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, A portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio, and it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. We are chatting with Kenneth Hensley. And basically, Ken is tying up his incredible series he's given on the show, which deals with the consequences of denying God's existence. And before the break, Ken, you mentioned the human dignity, that human beings are on a different plane in terms of dignity as opposed to anything else on the planet. That's something intuitively they know. And then you were talking about the moral law, and I have to apologize. The music kind of snuck up on us on that segment.
That's all right. Yeah. What I'm doing actually is I'm just walking through illustrations of things that an atheist knows in his heart of hearts and yet cannot account for on the basis of his atheism. He knows these things to be true, and yet if atheism were true, they would not be true, okay?
Right.
For instance, his belief in the unique worth and dignity of the human person, or his belief in moral law. Another thing that the atheist knows is that human beings possess intrinsic rights. We talk about the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, atheists sometimes will spend their entire lives, devote their lives to fighting for human rights. And yet again, if atheism were true, if the universe really were nothing but this giant material machine that has just come up out of nowhere accidentally, intrinsic rights don't exist. You cannot account for the existence. The best we can say is that rights are something that we decide to offer to each other or not. Another thing that he knows is that life has meaning and purpose. People all live as though life had meaning, as though life had purpose. And yet, if you believe that the universe is a universe without God, then life has no meaning, ultimately. Life has no purpose. It's just a big accident. And if the entire universe is an accident, then we, as small parts of that universe, are also accidents. Another thing that he knows is consciousness. He knows that consciousness is real. He knows that somehow the sense that he has of himself as someone, his personal identity, is not entirely reducible to processes in the brain, electrochemical processes. Mm-hmm. And yet, again, if atheism were true, then that's all he is. That's all you are, Gary. If atheism is true, you are nothing more. Your sense of self is nothing more than some kind of electrochemical process going on in a brain. Yeah. Your brain is, as Daniel Dennett says, your brain is tricking you into thinking you're someone when you're no one. So right. We're walking through these. Let me just list again so that it kind of ties together and makes sense. What I'm saying is that because every person is the image and likeness of God, we have the law of God, as it were, written into our hearts. We have the knowledge of God written into our hearts. And so we come into this world and we all know that human beings have special value. We all know that right and wrong are real. We all live as though they were real. We all believe that human beings possess intrinsic rights. We all believe that there's meaning and purpose to human life. We all believe that we really are somebody. That we are persons and we're more than somehow, a bunch of electrochemical, a bunch of neurons firing in a pile of meat. We all know, too, that freedom is real, that we can make choices and that we're morally accountable for our choices. And yet, if atheism is true, the universe is just this giant mechanical deterministic process. And so, as Sam Harris, one of the most famous new atheists writing now, freedom is a complete illusion. He says we are nothing more than marionettes bouncing around on our strings. So freedom is gone too, and then knowledge is gone. We all assume that knowledge is possible, and yet, I mean, this is something we spent hours going into. I won't be able to support it very well, except to say that how can knowledge be possible? I mean, how can knowledge be possible if I believe in a universe that cannot even account for the existence of laws of reasoning or thought or anything like that? Because nothing really exists except particles.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, to tie that all up, being a mirror of God's being, the atheist that I'm talking to, I believe, knows all these things to one degree or another. He knows them intuitively. He knows them, and yet he can't account for any of them on the basis of what he says is true of the universe. And so when I discuss with him, what I'm trying to do, I guess, is to lead him kindly, lovingly, to see this contradiction that exists deep in his life, and that is the most basic and fundamental aspects of his experience, the things he actually believes the most in and that he cares the most about are all the things that he can't make any sense of at all on the basis of his atheism.
Yeah, all the things that you listed too, they seem to be objective features in reality. It isn't like, well, I gave this a lot of thought, and then it occurred to me that I'm conscious of myself. It's apparent. It's like it's a part of the furniture of the world we live in, and so in a way, it's fundamentally like a denial of reality.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's almost like if you and I were to look around and see all kinds of things, and then we were to find out that we don't have eyes.
Yeah, right.
That according to our worldview, we don't have eyes. And yet we see everything.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So what I'm putting my finger on with all this is the tension that I believe that an atheist lives in. This tension that exists between being the creation of God, the image and likeness of God, and knowing all these things and experiencing them all and assuming them all and living in accordance with them all, and yet not being able to account for any of them on the basis of what he says is true. And so I like to use the illustration of a guy. It'd be like a guy who denies the existence of gravity, and yet he walks around all day long, and every time his foot hits the floor, he's contradicting what he says is true.
Right.
He goes to deliver erudite lectures on the non-existence of gravity, and yet the very fact that he doesn't chain himself to the floor while he's speaking, and he doesn't glue his notes to the podium, is giving evidence continually that what he's saying isn't true, and that he kind of knows it isn't true. Because if he thought it was true, he wouldn't, he would chain himself to the floor, but he doesn't,
Yeah. Yeah. So, is this a continual denial, or is it that if you can come up with some materialistic explanation, you kind of put the whole idea in a closet and you don't really think about it anymore? What's been your experience?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I'm not sure how easy it is to answer because it's probably a little different with every person. I think that what it is that being the image and likeness of God, all of these things are so intuitive and so natural to us that we do put that into a different box, so that when it comes to philosophy, someone studies or they read some books by Richard Dawkins, they read The God Delusion, and they come away going, yeah, I don't believe in God. And they just don't see that there's any tension there, That's probably more basic, because some atheists do see the tension, because some atheists really feel that they have to come out and deny the existence of human rights or human freedom or consciousness. The more studied ones like Daniel Dennett or Sam Harris and them, who are willing to think through the implications. But I would say most people, no, they just don't think through the implications. Yeah, they just put it in two separate boxes. So they hold to a view of the world that is atheistic, and they say they don't believe in God. Then they just walk around acting like people created in the image and likeness of God all day long.
Yeah. And you've done such a great job throughout this series, relying on sources of atheists who, quite frankly, acknowledge all of these points. This is really, It isn't like you and I concocting these things and speculating. I mean, this is something that you can find in atheistic sources themselves.
Yes. Yeah, you can find quotations in atheistic philosophers and whatnot to support each one of these points and admit each one of these points. You know, that morality is an illusion, that consciousness is an illusion, all of that. By the way, I mean, I should put in at this point, because this has been stretched, this series is stretched on for months and months and months, but this series that I've written, the whole thing is available and easy to find at the Coming Home Network website.
Yeah, very
if someone goes to chnetwork.org and they click on resources, under resources we have pages for a variety of topics: God, the church, the Eucharist, Mary, whatnot. You know, and on each of those pages we give resources to help people with those ideas. Well, on the God page, my entire series is right there. So people who have enjoyed this could go there. You know, I don't mean to be concluding, because I got a little more to say here today, but can go there and they can see all those articles. They can probably print them off and whatnot if they want. So
sure. Or if you prefer, folks, a hard print version, look up The Godless Delusion by Patrick Madrid and Ken Hensley, and that covers much of the same ground as well.
Yeah, it's a little different. I actually think that since that time in developing this series, I think I've broken things down much more systematically, and I like this written series better than I like the book.
Okay, good.
But anyway, so let me move. I understand the music's going to hit us soon. Okay, so
got about 2 minutes.
Excuse me. So here's an illustration that has come along the way that I think is really, really good in understanding this, is my illustration of the rancher and the cattle rustler. Okay. I didn't make this up. One of my teachers liked to use this analogy and taught it to me. One of the most brilliant apologists that, of the last 50 years, actually, I believe. Anyway, the rancher and the cattle rustler. And what he said was this. He said, when you look from the outside, a cattle rustler looks exactly like a legitimate rancher. They both are wearing expensive hats and boots. They both have these shiny belt buckles. They both live in nice ranches, and they both have corrals filled with beautiful head of cattle. The only difference between them is that the legitimate rancher can account for his cattle. The rustler can't. Okay. In fact, the rustler would have no cattle at all if he had not borrowed them, so to speak, from the legitimate rancher.
Yeah, very good.
Okay,
I'm hearing the music. So, let's leave it there. We'll unpack that on the other side of the break. We're chatting with Ken Hensley. More to come on the other side of the break, folks. Stay tuned. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics.
Hi, this is Terry Barber. I want to share with you a wonderful program called The Legacy of Love and Devotion. Well, what is it? Well, it's where you share your life and love of your Catholic faith with your family for the next century and beyond. Let's face it, our Lord is going to call you home at some time, and how are you going to evangelize your relatives in the future? Well, by coming into my studio by a telephone call and telling your story of how you love Jesus and Mary and the church, and giving information to your grandchildren and beyond their love for the Catholic faith. How does it work? I'm going to tell you more if you call me on my cell phone, 661-972-7872, and I'll give you all the details of how you can pass on your Catholic faith to the next generation and the following generations. It's a very unique program. I want to tell you more about it. Call me at 661-972-7872. God love you.
Jesus said in Luke 17, "When you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have only done our duty.'" According to St. John of the Cross, God is pleased with the little deeds we do in secret, He takes more pleasure in these than in a multitude of grand works that we may do out of the desire to be seen by others. May God help us to do the things that please Him, and not just to appear great in the eyes of others.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. And one of the things I love about this show is that we have the live chat on YouTube going. And, you'll enjoy this, Ken, one of our apologists in the social media section of our dojo here. George O. dropped a great quote from C.S. Lewis. Says, atheism turns out to be too simple. If the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning. I thought that was right in line with your thoughts on this series.
C.S. Lewis is good on this. I mean, C.S. Lewis is really good on the moral argument. The beginning section of Mere Christianity is classic on that. Yeah. But yeah, there's if it really had no meaning, then we should never have found that out. There are a lot of ways to look at that too. If atheism were true, and we really were nothing more than completely naturally evolved beings within nature, then we would feel completely one with nature. How would we not feel completely one with nature? And yet it's just common. It's like most of the art in the world, movies and books and everything like that. And poetry is all about how we kind of don't feel right, how people don't feel exactly natural, don't feel like they exactly fit into the world, which would be kind of impossible if we really, if we had just evolved, we'd be like apples, an apple hanging on the branch of a tree. It would be, we wouldn't feel unnatural in the least bit. There's a lot of ways of looking at that, I think C.S. Lewis said that, like a fish, you can't imagine a fish swimming in water, who's lived its entire existence underwater, feeling somehow, desperately unhappy that it can't fly.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And yet we live like with all these neuroses and whatnot that don't make sense if we really are completely natural. But okay,
which brings us back to the Wranglers and the Ranchers, right?
Yeah, the rancher and the wrangler, or the rancher and the cattle rustler. Again, from the outside, they look the same. Okay, they both have all the same accoutrements, and yet the difference is that the rancher can account for the cattle that he has. The rustler can't. In fact, if the rustler hadn't been swinging a wide rope, as they used to say, or a wide lasso, and stealing the cattle, he wouldn't have any cattle in his corrals at all. And I think that this is a good illustration. It's very similar. I look at my atheist friend and I see that he possesses a great deal of what I possess as one who believes in God and in our creation in God's image and likeness. He believes in moral absolutes. He believes that life has meaning. He believes that human beings have high value, equal value, and dignity. He believes in and the inalienable rights of people. He's got meaning and purpose. He believes in freedom. He's got all this kind of stuff. So he's got the same cattle, if you will, in his corral that I've got in mine. And he lives each day very naturally as though he felt that all of this just quite naturally belongs to him and makes sense to him. But for the life of him, when he's pressed, he can't account for how he came to possess these cattle.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I wish I'd made it up because I do think it's brilliant. So, but the thing is, when I'm doing apologetics then with him, when I'm pressing him, it can be summarized as this. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get this rustler to account for his cattle. I'm basically just saying, okay, you've got all these beautiful cattle. Can you show me the receipts? Where did you get them?
Right.
And the reality is that the only reason that he's got them is because he's borrowed them, if you will, from a worldview, the Christian worldview, that can make sense of them, that can account for them, which is another way of saying that because he's made in the image and likeness of God, he just knows them to be true. But according to this illustration, he's borrowed them. He's living on borrowed capital. He's living on all kinds of things that he's got that he can't account for in accordance with his worldview.
Yeah, very good, very good. Here's a question for you: the cattle, okay, the things that non-believers kind of live around. It's part of their landscape, but they can't account for it. Is it distinctly Christian, or is it just basically theistic?
Well, I would rather at this point remain theistic, but it's got to be. I mean, if you push it and you move down several stages, it ends up becoming more and more Christian. But because it obviously implies a personal God, I just leave it at this as Christian theistic. The God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament, the God that is somewhat warped into a different shape with Islam. But basically, you're talking about a theistic worldview and a personal theistic worldview, because again, the God belief in whom can account for these things has to reflect these things. So it has to be a personal God, a God with freedom, a God with consciousness, personal consciousness, a God with knowledge, a God with moral, with moral absolutes, reflecting from his moral character and whatnot. So basically, what it argues for is theism, but personal theism.
Yeah. It's most of our audience is Catholic, so I think there's a great tie-in here where you could move from those recognitions to Trinitarian theology, because it was funny, right before the show, I'm going through the new Denzinger, which is basically, for those who don't know what that is, it's a new compilation of, actually not Denzinger, excuse me, Ludwig Gott's Outline of Catholic Dogma, the new version. Oh. And so it's outline, and I'm going through the Trinity, and one of the first De Fide things is that the Son is the knowledge of the Father. He comes from the Father.
Right.
It's the knowledge of the Father of himself. So you were talking about consciousness. I can see where it actually be very easy to move from the foundation you laid to start talking about God, in and of himself, of God being Trinitarian and so on.
Yeah, I think so. I'm thinking again about one of the arguments that C.S. Lewis made, is that it's difficult to account for love, or it's difficult to account for God loving if God really was a solitary being, as in Islam.
Yeah.
But as a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you have relationship built into the very nature of God, and love built into the very nature of God. How does a total monotheism, like with Judaism or with Islam, even account for God being loving? By the way, I hadn't heard about that book, so this is not the same as the Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma?
This is, it's a new edition. My friend, Dr. Robert Fastigi, is a contributing editor to it. So it's with updated Denzinger notations, and it's the latest edition of Ludwig Gott's Outline, which I guess the one that's in print, the old edition's like not as updated.
Oh, okay. Well, I need to get that, because I was reading Ott just the other day. I love that book.
Yeah, it's pricey. It's put out by Baronius Press. Since we're on the air, I might as well give a little plug for them. It's expensive. It's a hardcover, but it's one of those books that, it's a resource you're going to have on your shelves for the rest of your life, in my opinion. So why not blow a couple extra bucks and get a nice hardcover edition?
Yeah. Wow. Well, listen, I think that you and I should put our heads together and see if we want to do another series. Yeah. And launch out from here. But this brings this one pretty much to an end. Yeah.
So in terms of if you encounter, let's put ourselves in a place of someone who's just on the street, they meet into an old friend. The friend tells them that he no longer goes to church. He doesn't believe God exists. What would be a quick couple-minute breakdown of, like, how would you broach the subject on the street? Because we went through so much. Is there any one area you gravitate to? How would that conversation go?
Well, I kind of hold back from trying to do practical strategy, because I found my experience is that it ends up being different with every person. But my strategy in an outline is to, first of all, I want them to develop their worldview. So I'd want to ask them more. If you said you didn't believe in God, I'd say, oh, really? Why? What? Blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you believe in? Turn the corner and ask them for a positive. And then I guess after that, if I feel that it's the kind of thing where I can begin to drill down or ask questions or put my finger on that tension, the moral one is usually is the best to start with, because people all believe so strongly in morality. I think I gave you the illustration a long time ago about a guy that I worked with at a restaurant when I was waiting tables who announced himself to be a scientific atheist, and he and I became friends, and we had a good relationship there at the restaurant. And so I, started to talk to him about the fact that because he was a very moral man too. I began to talk about the fact that he had no grounds for morality. And one day he was standing in line at the bar, to get a bottle of wine. And I just walked up and pushed my way in front of him, and when he complained, I said, why are you complaining, man? The nature is red in tooth and claw, survival of the fittest. I'm taller than you are. I'm bigger than you are. I can do what I want, and he kind of laughed about it. But the moral path is a good one, because people who may not have thought about many of these other issues definitely believe in morality. And if you can begin to explain to them that they don't have a basis for morality, it can begin to affect them. So I guess I would just say that at least. But the way I approach every person, wow, it's just so different depending on who they are and what they say. But I want to begin by really hearing them and really having them explain to me what they do believe about the world. And then usually in that process, I can get an idea of where I'd want to begin talking.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because in a real way, your approach is kind of a matter of self-discovery. They kind of have to come to terms with I have cattle that I can't account for, basically. And so, the Socratic method, asking questions, drawing those things out, that makes perfect sense. Perfect.
And wanting to be nice to them, I don't begin by saying, oh, yeah, you're a stinking cattle rustler, you can't account for anything on the basis of your atheism. In fact, you can't even talk to me, because how can you, unless you can account for the process of reasoning and laws of logic on the basis of particles, then, you really can't even talk to me. No, I don't begin that way.
Very good. Well, Ken, it's hard to believe, but the hour has flown. Again, where can people go to get these, your outlines and your writings?
Well, I work for the Coming Home Network, so if you go to chnetwork.org, you can find on the website, if you hunt around, a lot of different things that I've written, series on this and that, they're there. If you want some recorded talks of mine, please go to kennethhensley.com. Just go to the store page. There's a lot that I've done on all kinds of issues, Sola Scriptura, Luther, Calvin, all kinds of things. kennethhensley.com. Thank you,
Very
Gary.
Good. Oh, thank you, Ken. That's Kenneth Hensley, ladies and gentlemen. Ah, boy. Yeah, time has flown, but never fear. High Impact Catholic Talk Radio is coming at you with the Terry and Jesse Show. For me, it's time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center here, turn off the JoJo lights. Thank you so much for listening and watching the program. And God willing, we'll talk again tomorrow on Hands on Apologetics. Bye-bye, everybody.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.